Well, good afternoon, and thank you for being in this session, knowing there's a couple other sessions that are taking place down the hall. It seems like we've gotten past the smell of the spa. Got a fascinating panel this afternoon. My name is Michael Moore. I'm from Houston, Texas. Spent a little time on the energy side and policy side without getting a lot of detail about myself. 5 panelists today, and we're going to talk about energy security and critical resources demand in the 21st century going forward. We've gotten some pretty good insights at a high level from some of the sessions earlier today, and here we have people that are on the ground in the middle of it to give us some very solid and pertinent insights. What I'd like to do is go down the line and have each one of my panelists introduce themselves and maybe give just a high point of their interests. So with that, I'm just going to start with you, Ian, and let you say hi and a couple of quick points, and we'll go right down the line. And when we're done with that, then I'll open up to them with some questions I have for each one individually to allow them to give us some insights, the areas they think are of importance in relation to this panel, and then we'll open it up for general discussion. So, Ian?
Well, thanks very much, Mike.
Certainly.
Thank you for inviting me here today. I don't want to say too much. There was a big presentation this morning about global supply and demand and a great deal of numbers and facts. So I thought I might try and...
Don't say anything.
Okay. I thought I might try and illustrate it with a small anecdote which was told, actually not by me, by Tom Hofmeister, who used to be the head of Shell US, and it was a man with a good sense of humor. And he said, if you ever feel depressed in your industry, you should go down to the local maternity ward. And every single baby there represents 30,000 gallons. And so the anecdote really describes the demand challenge that we're looking at over the next 20 or 30 years. Population is growing substantially. The last 10 years, 750 million people have joined the aspirational middle class of people who want to drive, who want electricity, who want power, and that's what's driving our industry. So by 2030, we're looking at a 33% increase in energy. And we would expect that even though renewables will grow and nuclear will grow, oil and gas will still make up over 50% of that demand pattern in the time to come. So the question then is, where is that going to come from? And as Fatih pointed out this morning, the Middle East will be a significant part of that. Whether IOCs can be part of that is a big question, because when you look at if the Middle East is to rise to that challenge, then that means Iran and it means Iraq, and those are big challenges. But these are the countries that have the potential to meet the demand over the next 20 or 30 years. For IOCs, we are one of the consequences of the big change in oil prices over the last 10 years is a big change in costs. And projects cost a great deal of money now. So for IOCs, we as Chevron are spending at a rate of about $40 billion a year in capital programs. That's what it takes to keep pace. And our interest is substantially in less than conventional development. So in deep water and ultra deep water oil and gas production, and in unconventional shale and tight oil. That's predominantly what IOCs will be able to grow, with a few opportunities, niche opportunities to look at more conventional development. The big challenge for the oil and gas industry for us is to fight what we call as our decline curve. We have a few legacy prospects in Chevron, Tengiz with a 20-year plateau, new developments such as Gorgon and Wheatstone with long plateaus. But for the most part, most of what we do comes on stream, plateaus for 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and then goes into decline. So we constantly have to be fighting that. Chevron produces around 1 billion barrels a year, which means that Chevron has to put into reserves 1 billion barrels a year just to stand still. And that's a challenge that we face, and it drives us in all sorts of ways, and it drives us in technological advances to find that resource. So I think, Michael, I've probably taken up enough time.
I think we're good with that, and thank you very much, Ian. By the way, I'm remiss. I needed to do a couple of things as we got so eager to get this started. First off, all of our panelists have bios inside the materials that were handed to you when you came in, so that you can read a full profile on each one of the panelists if you haven't seen that already. Secondly, this is important, the session is on record, so I guess I'm telling you after the fact. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can, we'll restart the tape.
There's a mic in front of me, so I assume that.
Yeah, well, in press. Make sure your cell phones and the ringers are off if it's easy to get done. And if you're going to tweet, use the hashtag AC Summit. I've noticed that that's been getting done through the course of the morning by a number of folks. And we will have Q&A. And I did want to get that out, and sorry about that, Tom. But Tom, I'd like to let you go next.
Sure. I'm Tom Fanning. Pleasure to be here. I'm the chairman of the board, CEO and president of the Southern Company. The Southern Company is one of the largest electric utilities in the United States. Just to dimension it, from an energy production standpoint, we're a bit smaller, but similar in size from an energy production standpoint to the nation of Australia. What's kind of interesting about Southern Company is that when people talk about all the above or the full portfolio or whatever, we're the only company in America actually doing it. We are leading the United States in the renaissance of new nuclear. We have the only technology in the United States, we developed it ourselves along with Kellogg Brown Root, where we can produce energy out of low-rank coal and do it with a carbon footprint better than natural gas. We're deploying that in Mississippi, and we have signed a couple of agreements in China, and we're talking, I know, here in Europe about further applications for that. So nuclear, coal, natural gas. Probably before I became CEO, we produced about 70% of our energy from coal. Now, that energy production is around 35 to 40%. And we have moved that coal production away to natural gas. We've taken advantage of this shale boom. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves not the biggest coal consumer in the United States, but the third largest gas consumer. So that's produced a whole set of interesting challenges. And I must say, and I've written extensively on this, and you can look on the internet or YouTube or whatever, I talk about this stuff a lot. This gas revolution is not free. There's probably 5 reasons why we ought to be cautious of natural gas. So natural gas is the third area of the portfolio. The fourth area of the portfolio would go to renewables. I have been, remain, and will continue to be, as long as I know, particularly bullish on solar, particularly photovoltaics. We're one of the largest owners of photovoltaic systems in the United States. While our major utility is in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and northern Florida, we own competitive generation all across the United States, including New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, and a variety of other states. Most of that is solar. And so we're pushing, in a very big way, photovoltaics as something that has great promise in the future. The state of Georgia in the United States is the largest voluntary solar program in the nation. And then kind of the fifth area that I always include in the portfolio is energy efficiency. I think that gets short shrift most of the time. And a lot of people in my business, frankly, are threatened, I think, by that. But we've been big leaders from an energy standpoint. We've avoided about 3 years of energy from the cities of, say, Birmingham, Alabama, and Savannah combined, so Savannah, Georgia combined. And from a capacity standpoint, that is the amount of brick and mortar generating capacity we've avoided, has been something like 11% of our total generation portfolio. Considering how big that we are, that's a big deal. The energy security aspect is particularly important to me. I co-chair, along with Dave Cody of Honeywell, at the Business Roundtable, the North American Energy Security Plan. And so working together with Canada and Mexico, I think we can really change the dialogue of energy policy in the United States from one that has been set on scarcity to one that will now be set on abundance. And that really does change the conversation. As I like to say, that energy security breeds national security, breeds economic security. And when I think about the economic benefits of new energy policy around the world, I think it has enormous potential.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Cañete?
Hello, thank you. When I saw the name of the panel, critical sources of energy supply and demand in the 21st century, having in mind that I have taken office 20 days ago, I started to think what is it going to be all about. But I have some clear ideas. The first one is, it's clear that global demand of energy is going to increase. It's also clear that in the case of the European Union, we are now one-sixth of the global demand of energy in the world. But in 2030, 2035, we will just be one-tenth. And that means something very clear, that emerging countries are going to be very high demanding of energy on one side, and that we will have to compete in the fossil fuels market with new emerging countries, and it's going to be a fierce competition. And that leads me to point out the main problem that we have in the European Union, we have it in the energy sector. But one of them is a problem of competitiveness. We need secure energy, that's for true, and we have the whole problems of energy security and the actual difficult geopolitical situation in the world, all over the world, and all over the places where they are the big providers of energy. It's very curious that probably the conflicts are always in areas very sensitive to energy. But we have also a problem of competitive energy. The prices of the gas for the European industry are 3 times more expensive than for the North American industry, and 20% more expensive than the Chinese. And in the case of electricity, our situation is our prices, retail prices, are double than those in the United States and 12% higher than those in China. And we compete in the same global markets. So we have a problem of expensive energy globally. And we must have, then we need to reform the functioning of the internal market, and the European Commission is going to launch a European Union strategy. One of the pillars will be developing a much more transparent and interconnected and competitive European internal market. That will be for sure. But at the same time, we must comply with the new demands of climate change, who makes things more complicated because we got them to other sources of energy like renewables, in which the objective of the European Union, the objective that the President of the Commission says, is being world leaders in renewables. And the transitional objective for 2030 is achieving 27% of renewables. Renewables energies at the moment have required big levels of subsidies, and it's very clear that that raises another concern. So we have a problem of energy security. We have a problem with the prices, internal prices we are facing, and that obliges us to diversify our sources and the routes of supply in order to avoid the problems that the different geopolitical situations can raise. It's a fascinating situation, but it's a problem that must be solved, because unless we are able to tackle with all the 3 problems at the same time, we will face a very difficult situation. We can face scarce situations of scarcity. We can face high price in energy, and we will not be able to fulfill our commitments with climate change. So it's a fascinating world, And if you ask me what is going to be the final outcome, I'm sure that the European Union will consistently make the necessary reforms to tackle with all the three problems. We are going to try to diversify our providers, suppliers. Imagine that at the moment, for gas, we are depending 60% of Russian imports at the moment, and there are countries who have a dependence in the European Union of 100% for gas, for electricity, for a single supplier, which is quite complex. We will also try to have developed autonomous sources, and it's proving difficult because experiences like shale gas and like fracking that in other areas have been developed. In our case, they find a public opinion which is reluctant to admit it, and it's taking time in order to develop these new techniques and make them admissible to our citizens. And we also have to develop renewables with a system of retribution that doesn't make bankrupt all the treasuries, because the first experiences led us to a very fast-track development, but at huge costs. And now we must rethink how we finish in developing renewables that are going to be very important in the future, and innovation, technology of storage will be of the utmost importance, and if we keep on solving all the little problems, we will end with competitive energy, clean energy, and safe energy.
Thank you, Commissioner. Rovnag.
Sağ olun. Hörmətli zirvə iştirakçıları, değerli qonaqlar, hamını salamlayıram. Sizlere bu önemli sammitdə görüşməyə münasibətle məmnun olduğumu bildirmək istəyirəm. Azərbaycan enerji sektoru əsrin anlaşmasının imzalanmasının bu yana 20. ildə çok önemli başarılara imza atmıştır. İqtisadiyyatımız yüksek sürətle inkişaf edir. Azərbaycan bölgemizin siyasi ve iktisadi yönden en lider devletlerden birine çevrilir. Bu başarılarda 2006. ildən faaliyete başlayan baş divisiyon boru xəttinin kimi mega projelerin rolü büyük olmuştur. Bu ve Azerbaycan artık önemli neft ihracatçısı olmakla yanaşı hem de büyük doğal gaz projeleriyle dünyanın dikkat merkezine çevrilmiştir. Bunun en esas sebeplerinden biri 2 ay önce Bakıda Güney Gaz Koridoru temelinin atılmasıdır. Azerbaycan gaz üretimin 2005. yılda ne kadar artık 40 milyar kubmetre satacağı gözlenilir. Ve dünya enerji arzında doğal gaz, petrolden sonra en kritik enerji kaynağı haline gelmiştir. Ve Azerbaycan artan doğal gaz üretimiyle bölgenin ve Avrupa ülkelerinin enerji tehlikesinde rolü karşıdaki illere daha da yükselecektir. Ekspert prognozları gösterir ki gelecek yıllarda Avrupa ve Türkiye'nin ithal enerjiye olan ihtiyaçları artan xətt ile devam ettirilecek. Ötən il Avropa Birliği ve Türkiye'nin doğal gaz tüketiminin 560 milyar kubmetre olarak gerçekleştirmiştir ve gaz üretimi ise üretimi 200 milyar kubmetre seviyesinde olmuştur. Yani ortada 360 milyar kubmetrelik bir ithal mevcuttur ve bu Avropa Birliği'ne ithaldan bağımsızlığın %64 oranlarında olduğunu, Türkiye'nin ise %98% sattığını göstermektedir. Bir sıra analitik enstitüler 2030 yılında Avrupa Birliği'nin gaz tüketiminin 600-610 milyar kubmetre kadar artacağını öngörürler ve Avrupa'nın büyümesi aynı zamanda nüve ve kömür istasyonlarının imtina olunması bu artımda mühim rol oynayacaktır. Bununla birlikte Avrupa Birliği'nin kendi üretimi olan ve Avrupa'ya Kuzey Denizi ile Norveç'ten gelen gazın təxminən 40 milyar kubmetre kadar azalacağı deyilir. Yani Avrupa'nın kendi üretimi 160 milyar kubmetre inecek, böylelikle de ithaldan bakımsızlığı %80'e yükselmeyi gözlenir. Eğer doğal gazın nəql vasitələrine baxsaq, görərik ki, Avropa Birliği ölkələrine gələn qazın %80'i boru xətləri, %20'si isə LNG ilə gerçəkləşdirir və hazırda 3 mərkəzi koridor mövcuddur. Kuzey Dənizindən Norveç və İngiltərə qaynaqları, ikinci Doğu koridoru deyə biləcəyimiz Rusiyadandır. Üçüncü koridor Afrika üzərindən Aljazair, Libiyadan və Ağdənizdən gələn boru xətlərdir. Qalan 20'lik tələbat isə Nigeriya, Qatardan LNG təmin etməkdədir. Keçən il Avropa Rusiyadan 136 milyard kubmetr qaz ithal etmişdir və bu da Rusiyanın Avropa qaz bazarının %30'undan artıq hissəsini nəzarət etdiyini göstərir. Uluslararası qurumlar təxmin edirlər ki, 2030-cu ildən ən uyğun şərtlərlə belə bu ixracat Rusiyadan daha 100 milyard kubmetr artırılaraq 236 milyard kubmetrə qədər yüksələ bilər ən böyük maksimum proqnozlarla. Avropanın ikinciden böyük qaz tədarükçüsü Norveçdən bugün AB'ye gələn 112 milyard kubmetr həcmində qaz ithal edir və bazarın 31%'ını əlində tutur. Kuzey Dənizində ehtiyatlar azalmaqdadır və proqnozlar əsasən 2030-cu ildə artıq bu qaynaqlardan təxminən 20 milyard kubmetr qaz azalmaq gözlənilir və 90 milyard kubmetrə 100 milyardın altında olan bir rəqəmə çatacaq. Üçüncü böyük qaz ixracatçısı olan Cəzair 45 milyard kubmetrə Avropanın bazarının %12'sini əlində toplamışdır. Oradan gələcək qazın 30-cu ildə daha 35 milyard kubmetr artırıla bilər və 80 milyard kubmetrə qədər çata bilər gözlənilir. Və dünyadakı önəmli doğal qaz ixracatı biri olan Qatar, Avropa LNG ilə 30 milyard kubmetr qaz gətirməklə pazarın %8.5%'ni kontrol edir. Onun əsas pazarı Pasifik Okyanusu havzası və uzaq doğu ölkələridir. Ancaq təxmin etmək olar ki, Qatar Avropa pazarının əlavə olaraq 10 milyard kubmetr qaz göndərməklə ixracatı 40 milyard kubmetrə çıxara bilər. Bunlar təbii ki, pozitiv senaryolardır, amma hətta ən iyi halda belə ortada 100 milyard kubmetrə və bəlkə də daha artıq qaz tələbatı açıq qalır. Bu tələbat nereden və nasıl təmin olunacaq sualın ən doğru cavabı zənimcə Güney qaz koridorudur və 45 milyard dollara yaxın yatırım tutarıyla həyata keçirilən olan Güney qaz koridoru 4 əsas hissədən ibarətdir və bildiyiniz kimi bunların birincisi 1.2 trilyon metrekub rezervə sahib olan Şahdəniz yatağının inkişaf etdirilməsi fazı 2 projesidir. Və projenin yekun yatırım qərarı 17 Aralık 2013-cü il tarixində verilmişdir və bu yataqdan hazırda 9 və fazla 2 projesi ilə Güney qaz koridoru 16 milyard kubmetr dolar təmin ediləcəkdir. Projenin ikinci qisminin hal-hazırda istimarda olan Güney Kafkazya qaz boru xəttinin genişlənməsi təşkil edir və bu istiqamətdə inşaat artıq çalışmaları 20 Eylül 14-cü ildə Cumhurbaşqanı İlham Əliyevin iştirakıyla keçirilən təməl atma törəni başlanmışdır və inşaat artıq gedir. Güney qaz koridorunun təməlini isə stratejik hədəf çərçivəsində Azərbaycan və Türkiyənin ortaq həyata keçirdiyi TANAP projesi təşkil edir. Və TANAP projesi Azərbaycan və Türkiyənin birlikdə gerçəkləndirici və bölgənin enerji xəritəsini dəyişə biləcək çox önəmli bir projedir. Mən deyərdim ki, Güney qaz koridorunun ən həyati hissəsidir və TANAPsız Güney qaz koridoru düşünmək mümkün deyil. Və xəritəni göz önündə canlandırdıqda görərsiniz ki, Türkiyənin batısında qaz tələbatının yıllık 560 milyard kubmetr təşkil edən Avropa Birliği yerləşməkdədir. Bu göstəricisi dünya qaz tələbatının %17'si deməkdir. Və Türkiyənin doğusunda isə dünya qaz qaynaqlarının çox önəmli bir hissəsini əlində tutan başqa başta Azərbaycan olmaqla Orta Asiya ölkələri, Orta Doğu və Doğu Ağdəniz bölgələri mövcuddur. Hal-hazırda bu qaz pazarları ilə qaz qaynaqlarının arasındakı ən önəmli proje TANAP'dır. Bununla ilgili bir qədər bilgi vermək istərdim. Türkiye iqtisadiyyatı son 20 yılda ortalama ortak olarak %4,2% büyümüştür. Onun enerji tələbatı ise %8,5'lik bir oranla artır. Yani enerji tələbatını iqtisadi artımdan 2 dəfə çox olmuştur. Son 20 yılda Türkiye'nin gaz tələbatı 3 dəfə artmıştır. Bu da Çin'den sonra dünyada ikinci en hızlı artımdır. Türkiye'nin 2023 hedefine çatabilmesi için o vakte kadar enerji sektörüne təxminən 120 milyar dollarlık yatırım yapılmalıdır. Ve TANAP'ın sermaye değeri 10-12 milyar qəbul etsək, bu 10% deməkdir və deməli TANAP bu sermaye değeriyle tək başına Türkiye enerji sektöründe ihtiyaç duyulan yatırımın 10%'idir. SOCAR'ın Türkiye'deki yatırımlarına TANAP da əlavə etsək, hedefimiz 20 milyar dolara yatırım ve bu ihtiyacın %20'sini karşılayabileceğimizi düşünürük. Bu da Azerbaycan'ın Sayın Cumhurbaşkanı İlham Əliyevin Türkiye ile kardeşlik ve strateji işbirliğine verdiği önemin ve Türkiye'nin Azerbaycan'ın ayrı tutmadığımızın gördüğümüzün en somut göstergesidir. Güney Gaz Koridoru son halqası ise Türkiye, Yunanistan sərhədindən başlayan Albaniyadan keçərək İtaliya uzanacaq Trans-Antarktik boru xəttini tap olacaqdır. Bu kəmər TANAP-la nəql olunacaq Azərbaycan qazını Avropaya daşıyacaqdır. TANAP-la bağlı seçim qərarı 2013-cü ilin Haziran ayında verilmiştir. Sonunda bütün bu projeleri gerçəkləşdirərkən bizdən himayələrin əsir gəlmədiklərinə, bizlərə inanıb dəstək verdiklərinə və bu projenin bütün mərhələlərini nəzarətimizdə saxladığına görə Azərbaycanın prezidenti İlham Əliyevə, Türkiye Cumhurbaşkanı Sayın Recep Tayyip Erdoğan'a, Türkiye Başbakanı Əhməd Davutoğlu'na ve her zaman yanımızda olan Enerji Kaynaklar Naziri Taner Yıldız'a biz təşəkkürlərimizi bildirdik ve düşünürük ki o projede onların bu emeği olmasaydı bu projenin hayata geçirmek çok bir çətin olabilirdi. Biz SOCAR olarak bundan sonra da bölgemizin daha yüksek inkişafına, bölgesel ve global işbirliğinin artmasına, bütün dünyada enerji güvenliğinin təmin edilmesine olan gösterdiğimizi, işlerimizi devam ettireceğiz ve vaxtınızı çok aldım. Diqqətli üçün çok sağ olun. Sualları cevaplandırmaya hazırım. Sağ olun.
All right, thank you, Murat. Amos.
Thanks. Well, first, let me make a few very quick points. As representing the State Department as the Special Envoy for Energy, I'll give it more as a foreign policy aspect of energy and how we see the world and what as the United States, what our role in it is, looking at energy security, and the full supply chain of what matters to U.S. foreign policy interests in this, and that's obviously the interplay between what's happening domestically in the United States and what's understanding that in the global context of what's happening around the world. This is a very exciting time for us because when I took this job 3 years ago, these remarks would have been entirely different, and the entire world that we addressed was different. And one of my first briefings when I started the job, I asked a number of folks from the IEA and from some of the corporate sector. I said, well, we're starting to hear about this thing, shale gas, and is this possible that we'll do this in oil as well? And they said, no, don't worry, that will never happen. This is really only about gas, it's not about oil. 2 million barrel a day increase in U.S. production since then, and I'm just talking about a briefing 3.5 years ago. So I approach this very much not as the analyst. I leave that to Fatih and to others in the think tank community, but also remembering whenever I'm asked by my bosses in the Secretary of State or in the White House about, well, where are we going? I said, well, if I knew that, I'd be sitting somewhere else. But also just remember where our projections were 3 years ago and 5 years ago. And projections are important, but it's important to take into context of how quickly and how fascinating the changes and dramatic the changes have been. One of those changes has been, as we look at this, is what the supply and demand is. So it's not only about where the resources are coming from, but where are they going? So as this session talks about the supply side and what the new parts of supply are going to be, and I think that's critical, we also have to look at the other side of it. And that's another critical change. That it's no longer driven by the United States and the OECD countries, it's being driven by the non-OECD countries that have already eclipsed the OECD countries in demand, and that trend is only going to continue and grow. For the United States, obviously because of our domestic production and our greater efficiency rates and changes in our dynamics in America, our demand and our imports have declined, which has helped this transition to the non-OECD demand. But that's also happening because of the enormous growth in the non-OECD world. But on the supply side, we went from an oil talking about an OPEC world, where we constantly were obsessed with headlines all the time about when the next OPEC meeting was. And now we've gone to obsession and headlines about what is America going to do on gas exports or oil exports or condensate exports, and we don't talk as much about it. And obviously we think some of that is a good thing. The obsession over our decision-making on LNG exports, not as good. But that demand change, and the supply chain, sorry, is happening elsewhere because we're having other new suppliers coming onto the market. And we're having a much more diffused supply chain of not only a number of countries that we are familiar with, but whether it's in Mozambique and Tanzania and the rest of East Africa, whether it's the East Med that potentially can come online, or the enormous quantities coming online, I think as Ian talked about, in Australia, Papua New Guinea, and in West Africa as well. We're seeing this change of new supply coming online in a variety of different places. And clearly with the changes and reforms in Mexico, that changes how we see not the United States, but rather North America, of Mexico and the United States and Canada and Colombia and others. So there's that one dynamic of the supply and demand change that is so interesting to watch for us. In that is the issue of security of supply. And there we look at a number of aspects. One is the disruptions, and constantly trying to stay ahead of the game of understanding not what the disruption today is that we all know, but what is the possible and potential disruption of tomorrow. And as we look, and I follow the coverage of the decline in oil prices over the last several weeks, and folks talk about the era of abundance, and I think about a conversation I've had with my former boss, with Secretary Clinton, saying, we're doing well, but here's what we're dependent on. Everything going well in Iraq, everything going well in Libya, everything going well in Nigeria, everything going well in Venezuela. And you start getting to the point we have a lot of risk that is there. Now we're going to have to work with all these countries. That's in our interest, to work to make sure that we don't have disruptions. Because our interest is to make sure that we have, as to the degree that we can, a balanced energy market and one that is free of these kinds of disruptions. But the security of supply doesn't end there with the disruption potential. And that's without, by the way, talking about natural disasters that could happen that would put us in a vulnerable position. But then as we looked at June 16, when supply of gas from Russia to Ukraine ceased, not knowing if that's going to reach into the winter or not, and we came pretty close, that's another security of supply. And that we consider to be, while it affects Europe, and we are not on the chain of supply of Russian gas, but that affects our economic security and our national security. And as it impacts European energy security and economic security, it once again affects our national security from that perspective as well. And therefore, it is in our interest to work together with the new commission now, and as we did with the previous commission, to look at what are the things that we can do together to enhance that. And that is the diversification in the true sense of the word. And that is diversification of the supply routes, the diversification of the supplier, and the supply itself, the mix, that I think that Commissioner Cañete discussed already. So as we look at that mix, we have to look at all three parts of it and not come up with new schemes and new ideas that actually strengthen not the diversification, but the dependence. And as we look at that, that's not unique to Europe. And that leads to our global view. When we look at the Caribbean or Central America, we have to, everywhere around the world, make sure that countries are not dependent on one single supplier for their economic and national security. So our view continues to be global of how do we deal with Central America and grid integration. We have the Connect 2022, which is a an ambitious plan that we have with some of our friends in Central America, chaired by Colombia, to connect the grids from Canada down south. But that's part of that security of supply that I'm referring to around the world. And that leads me to Southeast Asia and North Asia. And as we look at a region that is growing in demand, but it lacks in an integrated market or trading of gas, interconnection of either pipeline or grid with countries that are energy poor next door to countries that have a surplus, that is an area that we have to work together as an international community to put an end to. And as what connects all of this, and is in my mind, is trying to understand where the interconnection of government, the public sector, and the private sector. Because one of the things that I struggle with is something that Southern Company probably has a lot of answers to, is that bankability of projects. If we want to talk about, as Ian said, taking to account that oil and gas, hydrocarbons will continue to be a dominant part of our fuel mix into the future. But how do we start that process and accelerate the process of renewable integration and of the access of energy to everyone? And that means we can throw around renewable targets and so on. We should all do that, and we want to do that. But how do we do that in a bankable way? How do we make projects that are currently not financeable into financeable? How do we address small island states? How do we address other energy islands and make those more financeable? And I think that's where the interplay of government and private sector and the private energy sector and the banks have to come together. And so those are some of the things, again, just in highlights of that we're looking at, that we try to understand better in order to achieve a more balanced energy market, free of both disruption, but also using energy as a tool for peace, stability, prosperity, interconnection. And to bring all that together, we also have to work together. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, Amos. It's quite a bit to think about here with the 5 panelists that we've had in front of us, the insights and experiences. What I want to do is have a question for each one. And I think having finished up with Amos and some of the issues he talked about is a good segue to you, Tom, if you don't mind. And I have a question here. As we've been reading in the news lately, the regions like Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia are facing complex array of economic, energy, and security and environmental challenges. Throughout its history, Southern Company has faced its own share of challenges on these fronts. You've been in business a long time, so you've got to see and do quite a bit right up to today, and has had success in overcoming them. In your view, what from Southern Company's experiences could the leaders from these regions look to for guidance and practical solutions?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I'd kind of go to one point I made and one point I didn't make, and one is the value of the diversified portfolio. We are the only company in America doing new nuclear, 21st century coal, natural gas, renewables, energy efficiency at scale. And at scale, the portfolio has tremendous value. Got to understand that putting too many bets in any one of those sectors doesn't serve you well over time. And I think as we tend to think about the hydrocarbon sector, particularly natural gas, as this wonderful thing, it does have a significant amount of risk. And in fact, if I would think about the overall risk of the portfolio as we move closer to a volatile kind of commodity like natural gas, I'll bet you the risk of the portfolio is probably up 50% or more. So we really do need to think about kind of avenues around that. It is a logical bridge to the future. It is not ultimately the future that we should be seeking, and therefore it is renewables and it is nuclear in my view. And then as a proxy for nuclear, it is coal with carbon capture technology, which is one of the things we're developing. Theme that I didn't talk about that I should, and I think it's very important. We can't, from an energy policy standpoint, and we're so lucky right now to have energy policy be able to be set by abundance if we just let it happen, not by scarcity. then in fact, I think we have the time to create our own future. One of the things I'm proud of Southern is that we're the only company in America in my industry that does proprietary, robust research and development. And in fact, we've developed, along with our partner Kellogg Brown Root, this technology to take coal and make it cleaner than natural gas in its ultimate consumption. And when I think someone mentioned in a panel earlier today about the value of new kind of developments in the micro scale, like distributed generation, particularly rooftop solar, or a variety of other things there, in essence, I don't really think those are disruptors. What are disruptors are technology advancements that I bet you everybody in this room is underscoring as we sit here. And when I think about kind of where energy when I think about the segments of the industry, I always break it into make, move, and sell or consume. And I think the real disruptors potentially are in the notion of storage, which we've never really cracked the nut on. And I think with battery technology or storage at a mass scale, for example, pump storage hydro, or where you can basically compress air under the ground and strip it out during high peak periods, compressed air energy storage, those kinds of applications I think will make sense. The other kind of disruptor will be how people consume energy. It's funny, one time in my career, I guess I've had 15 different jobs at Southern Company since I've been there, and one of them was CIO. Now, you all know in the American vernacular, CIO stands for Chief Information Officer. I think many days I thought that stood for career is over. But I can tell you that the power of technology in terms of how we consume and the data around that is something that we have not yet tapped. We're having active discussions on a variety of fronts all over the place with people like Nest and everything else. You should know that a Nest thermostat is an adaptive thermostat to your house. It kind of measures your behavior and adapts the home accordingly. You've heard about the famous Bill Gates, right? He walks in his house and he goes into a room and there's a picture on the wall and it's the picture he likes to see. And when Melinda Gates walks into that same room later, it's the picture Melinda Gates likes to see, right? And when they both walk in the room, it's the picture that Melinda likes to see. Well, anyway, what you can do, I think, in the future is imagine control equipment where microchips become so pervasive, and this is not far in the future. Anything with say an asset value of $100 or more will have its own smart chip. And what now I'm currently referring to as this adaptive Nest thermostat really becomes a server for your house. And so in essence, your whole asset base within a residence or a business or a commercial property becomes adaptive. That has the potential to be disruptive and really change. So the two comments I guess I leave you with: one, bet on the portfolio, not on any one of the pieces of the portfolio. And two, create your own future. Invest in technology innovation. And my sense is whenever we draw these curves into 2050, we're way underestimating the unknown unknowns in terms of disruption, in terms of how we may either produce or consume energy.
Thank you, Tom. So TRIG could very well be a disruptor.
TRIG is the name of the technology that we've developed that consumes coal in a carbon footprint less than natural gas.
Thank you, Tom. Ian, I think I could come to you as we've kind of walked through some of the ideas on the resource issues we may have. And as Chevron, you've moved into Kurdistan region for large investments for future production. You want to go into that a little bit and why and how, and as much as you can, being on record.
Well, just before I do that, just want to pick up on one thing. I do believe there's a lot of unknown unknowns, and a lot of things are going to change. And I certainly, you know, the big challenge of power is storage, and I think that's correct. And the reason why gasoline is such an effective fuel is it's portable. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. And so long as it is the preeminent portable fuel, it'll be the preeminent fuel for transportation, and that will continue. I think the observation I wanted to make was that I think all of the efforts should go into new technologies, and I think carbon capture and storage is one of the exciting opportunities. I think also you have to deal with the reality of today, and that those technologies have some ways to go. We're applying carbon capture in Australia in the development of Gorgon field. It's a high carbon dioxide field, and so all of that carbon dioxide will be sequestered and stored. It's not a cheap option. It's a multi-billion-dollar option, and that's just to be kept on board. There's 300 years supply of gas in the world. We will come up with a different solution to gas well before we run out of gas, and I think that's a thing to remember. But in the meantime, gas as a transition fuel is an enormously effective tool, and I think as Europe in particular develops diversified supplies, it will be an important fuel for the next 20 or 30 years and beyond. Coming to Kurdistan, why is Kurdistan attractive? I think I asked a question recently of our executives that when was the last time you remember a successful onshore conventional oil well? And people were scratching their heads. So I think it's a long time. For most companies, it's been a long time since that's happened. Kurdistan is exciting because it offers that opportunity. It is an enormous potential of an undeveloped conventional oil and gas area, and to be honest, it was the independents that went 7 or 8 years ago and started to take risks and develop it. Since then, 2 or 3 other companies have gone in there to start exploring: Chevron, ExxonMobil, and Total, and it is extremely prospective. And we have 3 blocks there, and we're very glad we're there, and we're very committed to the region. That's why it's interesting. Now, right now, Kurdistan region of Iraq is producing around 300,000 barrels a day and 350,000 barrels a day and exporting much of that. We would see that potentially expanding substantially over the next 10 or 15 years, just based on discoveries announced today. It has a potential to go up to 800,000 barrels a day over the next 6 or 7 years. And based on discoveries that are yet to come, it could well be a major regional producer of particularly oil. And what I would say that's been attractive to us about the Kurdistan region is that they have offered commercial terms which are good enough. Now, I'm not going to say we don't get gangbuster terms anymore, if we ever did. But I would say that the terms in the Kurdistan region are good enough, and they accept that the investor has to be incentivized to invest their own money and to develop the resources. There are other parts of the world where the terms have got to a point where, yes, companies might take it, but they take it in the hope that somehow they can change them. They can get in there and modify those terms and renegotiate them. And when they can't, then you get stagnation. And I think that was referred to this morning by Ambassador Pascal when he talked about the southern part of Iraq, where there has to be that terms which are offered to companies have to be balanced, and they have to offer sufficient incentive for companies to want to put their capital in there and invest for the long term.
Great. Thank you very much, Ian. New insights on more resource for the region. Rovnag, how about an insight to your strategies to energy in Eastern Europe and the Balkans?
Biz Amerikalı dostum çok büyük çıxışında bildirdi ki ölkələrin bir-birindən birləşməsi və imkanların hamı istifadə etmək imkanları hamıya saxlanmasıdır. Balkan ölkələrindən dedir, bəzi Balkan ölkələri qazdan istifadə 0 səviyyəsindədir. Və bu ölkələrin inkişafı üçün və biz qaza və ən ekoloji təmiz yanacığa çatması üçün en vacip elementlerden biri TAP'ın Transatlantik boru kemerinin başa çatmasıdır. Ve bu boru xəttinin başa çatdırılmasından sonra biz düşünürük ki, Balkan ölkələri gözəl bir bazardır və həm interkonnektorlar tikməklə, transiyonik boru xətti ilə, ya dövlətlər arası Türkiyə, Bolqariya, Yunanistan, Bolqariya xətlərin yapmaqla, ya da dövlətlər arası bir balaca konnektorlar tikməklə tez bir zamanda Balkan ölkələrini hepsini gazdan istifadə imkanları yaratmaq olar və bununla da Avropanın mərkəzi olan Balkan ölkələrində yüksək ekoloji təmiz yanacaqla təmin etmək mümkün olacaqdır. Və bizim planlarımızda, perspektifimizdə budurubdur.
Thank you very much, Rovnag. So we have technology, we have different resources bases come into play. So I'm going to go back to Commissioner Cañete. Commissioner, so you talked about some of the issues that Europe may have, future resource opportunities and plays. We got the environmental issues in front of us as well. So maybe you've heard some new insights to add to what we were talking about as you opened up the session.
I made clear that we Europeans were astonished at the development of shale gas. Amos said 5 years ago it would be inconceivable. But when we have started to develop the same techniques, we have faced fierce opposition from environmental organizations, from local towns, and so on. It's quite difficult to develop that technique in the European Union. We have passed a communication establishing an horizontal framework of how should be done in case member states took the decision. As you know, European Union has a treaty under which the member states have the right to choose their own energy mix. So we don't have the ability of establishing an ideal European Union mix. If member states can choose its own one, and we in the Commission cannot impose any member state to do something. We regulate if you go for nuclear, safety goes this way. If you go for shale gas, you must take these precautions, and so on. So it makes things a little bit difficult. What we will have to do is to create the possibility of interconnections and to have a real market. Because one of the important things for investments in the energy sector is having a stable regulatory legal framework. Investors don't like regulatory risk. And that is why we are going to work in the next few years and have a very clear legal framework on one side, and then going also for the hardware, for the interconnections, investing huge amounts of money by the private sector, but being mobilized, like Amos said, by the public sector, establishing the incentives to leverage private money. We are going to launch a very ambitious plan, which is the Juncker plan, in which we will launch 300 billion euros in the next 3 years in order to act in areas like infrastructures, like energy efficiency, the interconnectors, and development of renewables. It's going to be a very ambitious plan. But the possibility of studying internal new resources is difficult for the moment. That's why it obliges us to one thing that we haven't spoken yet, which is going in the path of energy efficiency. Because one of the most effective tools to reduce external dependency, and the European Union is highly dependent from external sources of energy, is to have well-functioning markets and consumers who do an intelligent use of energy. If you take into account that 40% of the energy we consume in the European Union is employed in buildings, there are huge opportunities in energy efficiency. And also for growth and jobs, because this is labor intensive, working for energy efficiency. And that's why we have raised the level of our ambitions. Up to 2020, we wanted to go for a level of 20%. Now we have raised our level to go for 27 and if possibly 30. And the Commission position is that it was also a binding obligation, not an indicative one, for the European Union. If we go that path, we will have to use new system, intelligent grids, but also smart meters. And also, we have to educate our consumers to use all the possibilities of the new technologies. You can handle your house with a smartphone on a more clever way. You can do anything now. But still the development of smart meters, we are starting it now. We are going to incentivize it. It will be very important for energy efficiency. I think if the European Union is able to build and to support building all the interconnections needed, we have a level of interconnection only of 8% in electricity at the moment, and in the Iberian Peninsula, 1.4, which is, we have established that in 2020 we will be able to have 10%, and in 2030, 15%. That's the level and the difficulties of interconnection or our electricity market will be very important. But if we are also to support all the interconnectors for gas and support the southern corridor, which has many benefits. Mainly, it is the one who permits us break many monopolies that exist actually in the European Union with gas. So that's a very important corridor, the southern one, from a geopolitical point of view, from a point of view of security of supply, and also it's going to interconnect many countries and establish better links amongst them. There are many huge tasks. The energy sector is a sector with lots of possibilities. It requires lots of investment, it's true, and lots of ground for innovation. We have been discussing storage. Even the progress that is made at the moment, it has been huge progress. The batteries of cars are improving daily. The electric cars, there is one car which is going to run in the Dakar rally, which it will be electric. The possibility, the magnificent Tesla car in the United States is astonishing. 10 years ago, it would be unbelievable. But now we have batteries, we have systems. It's only we have developed all the technologies at the same time. It's a fascinating world, full of opportunities, but also it will require lots of work and lots of imagination. And I hope that those techniques that are being now looked into, like carbon capture and storage, have the necessary breakthroughs, because it will be important, because coal is going to be an important energy source, but we need to deliver at the same time mechanisms to make it compatible with climate change. Because the fight with climate change is a reality. In Paris, we have to achieve a binding compromise for all the nations of the world, and it will also require us to change our attitude to some kind of energy sources, and for that we need as much time as possible. I was very interested in the project of coal. My neighbor was commenting previously.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just an insight. I live in Houston. I've been around the energy sector about 30 years. I'm 57. So when I was in college, my point of reference of the United States' population was about 175 million people, and we were coming out of the back end of the oil embargo of the early 70s. So today we're 330 million people, and we're talking about U.S. being an oil exporter after doubling its population, and it's all in the back of technology. So who would have thought 30 years ago that I'd sit here and have this kind of conversation to put it in perspective? And this is taking place in other parts of the world as well. So Commissioner, your insights on what technology might have over the horizon for us, Tom, what you're doing with Southern and Trig and some of the countries here in this part of the world, the monetization of lignite, something that most people began to write off over the last few years as being incredibly too dirty to burn and utilize becomes maybe a very valuable regional security commodity that's got to be refigured back into the equation with your process. The captured CO2 can go to CO2 enhanced oil recovery, something we know extremely well in Texas and elsewhere. And there'll be a lot of announcements over the next few months of other potential capacities for captured CO2, CO2 in depleted shale zones like in the Bakken that have run their course, or the residual oil zone. There'll be some announcements on some very substantial reconfigurations of the reserve capacity for CO2 and ROS. Should captured CO2 have another relationship? And so all these things begin to kick into mind. The firm I'm with, Fearnoil, is part of Astrup Fearnleys out of Oslo. It's a shipping-related company. So when the shale event happened in the U.S., something also happened to shipping. Less ships were hauling commodities to the U.S. Different commodities were leaving the U.S. So the shipping community, its values of its assets that were banked on the fact that the United States would be a sinkhole of demand indefinitely, turned overnight to one of abundance. So the shipping world has had to readjust tanker routes, tanker values, clean products, pet chemicals, and manufactured goods that are exported out of the U.S. now that otherwise are being imported in. Ships typically are built port specific. A lot of things to consider when you're manufacturing those large vessels. Nigeria used to be one of the United States' largest customers for light sweet crudes. Today, it's almost zero. So in a very short period of time, Nigeria has not only lost its largest customer, but probably its best paying customer. We'd pay our bills on time. Didn't need any support to go have to write the checks. So Nigeria now has to find a whole new market for its crude oil in a marketplace that has lots of new competition. What does that mean at the end of the day? It's hard to tell, but the dynamics are very fluid. The technology that Tom unleashes, the interest that Commissioner, you're talking about in Europe to open up Europe, what Chevron's doing in areas of new resource development. I mean, and what you're doing with SOCAR out of Azerbaijan and its gas resources, it's very dynamic. And Amos, that leads me now to you. You get to, from the U.S. side, you get to juggle all this and make it all work. So maybe some new insights.
The last thing I would want is a headline out of this, that we juggle energy markets or the private sector as a non-participant government. I mean, one of the unique things about the United States is that we are a truly open market. We are one of the only places in the world where our energy sector is not owned by, controlled by, or influenced by the government. That, of course, creates some problems for us because usually people just don't believe us. So if an American company does something, we usually get the call, how could you let them do that? Our response is, it's an American company, it's not against the law, they can do whatever they want. They said, yes, but they would never do that without your authorization. On occasion, I said, even if the President of the United States called certain CEOs in America and told them, I don't want you investing there, I think they would do it anyway just to make the point that we are an open market. So as far as juggling, that's where we are as a government. But I think that there's been a lot of great points that made here, as Mike, as you has just round that up. But as we integrate technology, as we integrate renewables, and as we try to make this all work, and I think Ian's points are right, we have to have the market conditions that governments do have to, tying in what you and Ian said, having that investment environment that incentivizes companies to make the investment and to grow the business. Whether that's in oil and gas or whether that's in renewables, it's the same thing. But having that security of the investment and the security of later on, what do you do with that once the investment is there? And that's where in some of our most critical markets, in Europe, and I had the opportunity to have lunch with the new commissioner and talk about some of these issues of the new investments that have to be made in the infrastructure to allow the new investments to take hold. If you have the Europe that we have today that is not interconnected, then we're looking at making very expensive investments in different parts of Europe that don't integrate. But if we have the investment, the governmental investment in the integration, in the interconnection, then when you make an investment anywhere in Europe on technology, to Tom's points, that could have then a ripple effect in other countries as well because it's interconnected. But if we have a grid that is not interconnected with its neighbors, then I'm going to have to make the same investment over and over and over again, and that's inefficient. The same is true in Southeast Asia. And I think that's why we're trying to do this as much as we can in a market that's difficult. But how do you address, Burma, Myanmar, sitting next to countries that are at a 20% electrification rate, sitting next to countries at 100% electrification rate? We have to come up with some kind of accommodation, especially with the emerging markets. And how do you handle, the questions in India? And this is not, Mike, to us juggling it. It's more about how do we play a role as the United States in bringing together and convening and coordinating the donor side of it, of the international financial institutions, the private sector that will make the investments, the banks that will finance them, together with the governments of the regions. And that's, I think, what we would like to pay a little bit more attention to bring that world of tomorrow that allows our private sector's new technologies to take hold in a more effective and efficient way and bring about that new era as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Amos. Thank you. Is that on? All right, let's see the red light. We have enough time for a couple of questions from the audience. And again, we are on record, so because we do have press in the room and everything, just everybody keep in mind how the questions are asked and how they're answered. And please identify yourself.
Yes, Simon Henderson, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Mr. MacDonald said there's 300 years of natural gas in the world, and Mr. Fanning said he could think of 5 weaknesses for natural gas. I was wondering whether one or either or both could explain what the other meant by it. Thank you.
Well, wait, I'll stipulate there's a lot of natural gas.
Yeah.
It's not weaknesses, it's risks. Okay. So the 5 risks are, number 1 is we still have not plumbed the depths of environmental challenges to fracking. Number 2, we still have an enormous capital investment yet to be made around the world for gas infrastructure, including transportation and storage. 3 is we still have to resolve national policies on exports. For example, I support completely free exports from the United States. 4, we still have yet to assess the kind of intensity and ultimate impact of this demand curve shift of the consumption of natural gas. So, for example, in America, we talk about industrial processes moving to natural gas, my own industry moving to natural gas, transportation. I actually drive a Tesla. It's a fabulous car. So, look, there's all sorts of kind of interesting things where annual consumption in the United States would be 2012, 67 BCF per day. Last year, I think it was 70 BCF per day. Some predictions would show that you could get to 100 BCF per day. What happens to price and volatility? And 5, how do you hedge in notional financial markets price and volatility? That still is not as mature as it needs to be. Those are the 5 risk areas. Failing to address those risk areas just makes the consumption of natural gas and the dependence on natural gas risky. It is very attractive in the near term, but it's not a free lunch.
Ian.
Well, nothing is risk-free, of course, but I'm glad you accepted the abundance of natural gas, and it's because I think the shale gas is we're probably going to find that 90% of the world's shale gas resource is going to be in North America, and it's a North American phenomenon. But the rest of the natural gas around the world is conventional natural gas that's available in many countries, some developed now, some to be developed. One of the world's greatest sources of natural gas sits in Turkmenistan, and largely undeveloped. I would want to make an observation about hydraulic fracturing, because I would. It's been an industry standard practice for the last 50 years, and during that 50 years, we've fracked some 2 million wells. It is a safe practice, and one that's been well understood and well developed. Natural gas, as I described it, as a transition fuel. It has the benefit of today, now assuming you don't do carbon capture for coal, but against coal, it is 50% of the carbon dioxide emissions of coal. It is available, it is relatively inexpensive, and it is being increasingly developed as a portable fuel through LNG around the world. And more projects are coming on. Beyond the Gorgon and Wheatstone projects, which will be coming on in the next few years, in Australia, you have enormous natural gas resources that have been discovered in East Africa that will also be developed over the next few years in the Mediterranean, offshore South America. And that's without mentioning any of the enormous potential of the Arctic, which is likely to be sitting there for another 20 or 30 years before that actually gets developed. So I think the resource is there, but I do agree diversity is king, and utility companies, countries, and so on need to be diversifying not only the total numbers of fuels that they have, but also where they get the natural gas from.
Hey, let me just make sure you get the context. Under my watch at Southern Company, we've made the bet from 16% natural gas to now somewhere between 40 and 55% natural gas in our production. I'm long the bet. I'm just telling you, it's not the only arrow in the quiver.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question, and I think the gentleman back here has gotten a...
John Roberts with Limited and also a fellow of the Atlantic Council. Very quick question to all of the panel. Is it time to introduce carbon taxes?
Who wants it first?
I'll take it. Go ahead.
I can tell our experience. We have chosen not to go for carbon taxes, but for carbon markets. And it is starting to work. We are correcting some difficulties we experienced at the beginning, but our industry is in favor. We are developing it. The Chinese are also doing, the Swiss are also working. There are many experiences in some states in the United States. And we think if we develop reasonable carbon markets, we are able to homologate all of them. And finally, we then, with a global carbon market, it might be better than going for taxes by different governments for different reasons at different levels. Carbon market, if we have a global price, it's much better than different governments tampering. With carbon markets, governments don't tamper with the price of carbon.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tom, do you want to take that?
Sure, absolutely not,
Right.
Is the answer. And frankly, it's a carbon tax, a carbon market is an indirect tax. Look, we can offer people today around the world immense opportunity and hope. 46% of families we're privileged to serve in the United States make less than $40,000 a year, and they have a relatively fixed energy budget. And what they really want is a better place to live for their children, better education, better medical care, better food on the table. Taxing energy, which is a way for us all to play offense in otherwise a challenged environment, doesn't really address the problem. I think when you say, I want to create a price on carbon, what you're really trying to do is to get an outcome of less carbon. There are better ways to do that than making energy more expensive. And that is, over time, to create optimal portfolios of energy in any jurisdiction in which you thrive. That's my approach.
Right. Anybody else on the panel want to touch base on that, on the record?
So I think that the oil and gas industry is beyond doubt the most taxed industry in the world. And most countries in which we operate in, we pay about 80% tax. So we worry today about a price of oil which is about $80 a gallon. But when you buy that oil in a European gas station, you're paying about $400 a barrel. So that's how taxed the industry is today, and it's not. So no, the answer to your question is that we're not supporters of more tax on the oil and gas industry.
All right, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of quick points. We're going to wrap it up and thank you for the panels, but don't clap yet. I have to do this. So the next this session is going to be over. The next session begins at 4. We got to get a little extra time because we got a late start. There's 3 other sessions coming up after this. Managing political transition in an unstable region in Ballroom 1. International climate change strategies, which sounds like you can continue the carbon tax question over there. Located in this room following us. Energy strategy roundtable, synergies, challenges for cooperation in the Black Sea, Eastern Mediterranean, Caspian, Central Asia, and it's down at the Terabaya room. And with that, we'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And our audience.
Awesome.